Explore why. Angelo Coppola joins us now live from Johannesburg with more data on this. So, Angelo, yesterday the Treasury Director General said that the country is actually getting a $1 billion loan, or rather seeking a $1 billion loan from the new development bank in order to deal with this pandemic, and it's considering facilities from other IFIs. I mean, given the scale of the crisis here, this ideological grandstanding from the ANC and its allies doesn't really matter, does it?
Well, look, Mboweni is known for his single-mindedness and also for speaking his mind. In response to that IMF question, he reportedly told a journalist last week that there was no time for ideology. If not the IMF, then give me the money. I can't eat ideology. The question, of course, is whether Mboweni has the cabinet support to go to the IMF or the World Bank should the need arise. He can't do it on his own. And it's also unclear if President Ramaphosa supports Mboweni in this regard, and whether he has the support himself on the other hand. So it's about politics. Of course, you know that there aren't too many left-wing communists in the cabinet at the moment. So the SACP support for this request or letter is rather watered down. So it has been suggested that this is a battle that could probably go either way. So either towards Mboweni or towards Ace Magashule and his faction, Ramah.
Indeed, it's staggering that we're arguing about ideology in the midst of a crisis of this scale. But from the perspective of the finance minister, what sort of macroeconomic triggers would be sufficient for him to have to go to the IMF or the World Bank and say, look, guys, I need $1 billion or $2 billion or $3 billion credit line?
Well, look, the country most likely will go back into recession in the second quarter. Mostly because of COVID-19 or the coronavirus, but it was in that zone beforehand anyway, so and that's before the lockdown. Then of course there's the debt to GDP ratio, and that continues to climb and is expected to carry on climbing. That isn't good news. Thankfully though, inflation is generally under control at the moment, so that's one tick against going to the IMF. But this might all be a moot point, because you mentioned earlier about the BRICS Bank or the New Development Bank. They could come to the rescue if South Africa actually asks the bank. The bank, of course, last week very successfully launched a corona combating bond to the market, and that was probably on about Thursday or Friday, and it was 3 times oversubscribed at around 15 billion renminbi. So South Africa, as one of the BRICS founding countries, could probably have access to $1 billion annually. So that gives Mboweni a back door, in fact, and it probably wouldn't come with any terms and conditions that the IMF would do if we went to the IMF. So it would be a loan on favourable terms too, Ramah.
Indeed. One last question for you, Angelo. So 12 days into this lockdown, the country's got an extra 63 cases, 1 more death related to COVID-19. From the government's perspective, are these extraordinary measures that it has taken, are they working?
Well, look, Ron, this afternoon we were at a health minister's briefing where he told us that there are less than 100 people in hospital across the country at the moment due to coronavirus or any of its complications. Most of the cases that have been reported are mild and can be treated at home with some medical supervision. The daily increase also appears to be fairly contained at the moment, but he's under no illusions that we aren't out of the woods just yet. This may all, of course, change when the mass testing gets into full swing later this month. At the moment, of course, the picture isn't clear, with only a little over 50,000 tests having been completed. Mkhize, the Minister of Health, suggests that this will soon be they'll able to get to about 5,000 tests a day without the new testing equipment that's on its way to the country. We have, of course, 9 days to go for this round of the total lockdown, and there's no indication just yet whether there will be an extension or not. But he does say that it depends on everyone acting responsibly, washing their hands, keeping that social distance, and doing the right thing by staying at home, Ramah.
Indeed, we'll see how all of this does play out. Angelo Coppola live in Johannesburg. Thank you. On to Zimbabwe now. It will allow citizens to access remittances from the diaspora. The government over there says money transfer agencies will be open 3 times a week starting this Tuesday. At the same time, President Emmerson Mnangagwa has announced that fresh farm produce will now be allowed to be sold at the markets. The decision essentially eases some of the restrictions imposed as part of a 21-day lockdown across the country, which analysts feared could push Zimbabwe's already struggling economy to the brink of collapse. It also shows the limitations that most African governments do face as they seek to balance, on one hand, the need to stop the spread of COVID-19 while also keeping the economy still running. Let's explore this in a bit more detail. Farai Makutuye joins us now live from Harare with the latest. Farai, let me just start with a question that I guess a lot of people are asking. Before these restrictions were eased, how did authorities expect households to get access to fresh produce and just basic food during the lockdown?
Well, Rama, good question there. I think certainly when the government announced these measures, they said they were drastic and that they would be painful. I think they underestimated the magnitude to which the impact of these measures. Supermarkets, regular supermarkets, are open and are operating, albeit reduced hours. However, I think the challenge for many people is, most of these supermarkets are out of reach. They require you to catch transport from their homes to main shopping centers. And because transport is grounded, people can't get there. The prices of some of the goods in those supermarkets have also gone up. And also, I think in most cases, when people do go to supermarkets, they are buying in bulk. Many Zimbabweans, because of the nature of the economy, the nature of the informal work that they do, can't do that. Many of them live from hand to mouth. What they make on a particular day is what they eat on that day. And so that's left a lot of people stranded without enough food, not able to access some of the markets where they get this produce at reduced prices and that they require. But also I think the farmers themselves were stuck in this situation where they had produce ready to go to the market but with no takers, and it was going bad and they were risking throwing it all away. So a huge challenge. The remittances you've spoken about as well. A lot of Zimbabweans depend on their family outside the country, and when that lifeline was cut off, Zimbabweans didn't have access to money to be able to buy food during this lockdown. So a huge challenge, and I think that's why we're starting to see some of these revisions.
Indeed. So do these measures, these easements, do they go far enough, or is there a case to be made for further easing of restrictions within this 21-day window?
Well, I think, it is a good start for many people. I think the ability to be able to access the farmers' markets, to be able to go there and get the produce that they need, the ability to receive money from abroad. But we're likely to see, it is my anticipation that we're likely to see further easing, particularly in the area of public transport. As it stands, private commuter taxi operators are grounded. A lot of these people who require money from the diaspora need to go into the CBD or to banks or money transfer agencies. They'll require transport to get there. A lot of these people who are buying fresh produce from the farmers' markets require transport to get there. Currently, it is only government provided buses that are applying the routes, and they may not be adequate to meet the demand or the volume of people who may need to be ferried to these places now. So I expect that on the front of transport, we might see an easing there, perhaps even banks, traditional banking services also being opened up, certainly a certain number of days of the week. We're still in day 9 of this lockdown, 12 more days to go. That is a very long way to go, according to many informal traders I've spoken to. Many of them would like to see more restrictions, and I think that in response to the pleas and the calls that are being made, we are likely to see some revisions, but again with very strict regulation and control in terms of how people will be able to operate and get around.
Indeed. Will you be there for the time being? Farai Makutuye there live in Harare. Time now for a run through some corporate headlines. Let's start in South Africa. As we mentioned at the start of the hour, bank stocks opened more than 4% lower on Tuesday. They did rebound later on by more than 10%. Now, initially, the fall was triggered by the Reserve Bank's advice to refrain from dividend and bonus payouts. But investors were calmed a little later in the session by a number of factors, including signals from the Reserve Bank that the Finance Ministry was considering creating a scheme to stimulate lending to individuals and businesses. At the same time, mining and commodities trader Glencore has declared force majeure at its Mopani copper mines unit in Zambia, and it plans to suspend operations there for at least 3 months. Zambia's government, however, isn't amused. They've actually rejected the move. They say it would place over 10,000 jobs at risk. Glencore's decision comes days after it was announced that it was reviewing its Zambian operations to minimize costs amid all the uncertainty caused by this coronavirus pandemic. South Africa's strict coronavirus lockdown has also caused miners to divert copper from the country's ports to others In Africa, Dar es Salaam in Tanzania is turning out to be the clear winner here. Authorities in Africa's most industrialized economy initially said ports would only process essential goods during the 3-week nationwide lockdown, but they later revised that measure to include just about all types of cargo. That said, miners in the Copper Belt, which is an area spanning northern Zambia and the southern end of the Democratic Republic of Congo, did not wait for that clarification before rerouting their cargo. And finally, despite picture-perfect spring weather in India's Kashmir Valley, Asia's largest tulip garden will have no visitors this year to soak in its natural beauty. The garden has been shut for the first time since its conception back in 2007. India, as you might be aware, is currently under a 21-day lockdown to prevent the spread of COVID-19, which has infected over 4,000 people so far in a country that's home to over 1 billion people. That's a run through your headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. We'll see you shortly with more content after this.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Right, then a quick update on China in this program. Authorities over there have announced an end to the lockdown of the city of Wuhan as the COVID-19 epidemic wanes in the region. Now, an unprecedented lockdown was imposed in late January in order to curb the spread of this pathogen. But that said, authorities say that the city will still stick to first-level emergency response measures in tackling this virus, even as these restrictions are lifted. So traffic controls and checkpoints have been removed. That essentially means that highways, airports, rail stations and waterways will now be reopened to traffic. Elsewhere, the national grids of Egypt and Sudan are now officially connected. At least 70 megawatts of generation capacity can be handled by the existing connection. But as CGTN's Adel El Marouki now reports, that will rise in future upgrades.
The infrastructure for connecting the power grids in Egypt and Sudan has been ready for 1 year. But since last April, Egypt has been struggling to find the right time to operate it.
Deepening business ties deepens political relations. Electricity from the Ethiopian dam is very close to Sudan. But it will be a burden to the Sudanese economy to connect that power to the north of the country. Sudan consumes about 1,500 megawatts, which doesn't make it attractive to Ethiopia.
Currently, the electricity connection has a capacity of 70 megawatts at a voltage of 220. The next phase will see it rise to 300 megawatts. Cairo hopes this project will bring it closer to Sudan at a time when the Nile talks with Ethiopia have stalled.
Egypt needs projects to support its own. The construction of the electricity grid was there, it just needed some final touches. Following the revolution in Sudan, it was best to put it on hold. The timing now is perfect, and it comes before summer when temperatures there rise and there will be an increased demand for Egyptian electricity.
In recent years, Egypt has invested billions of dollars to boost its electricity production capacity. The country now has the capacity to export power to its neighbors. By May, Cairo is expected to sign another electricity interconnectivity project with Saudi Arabia. Egypt is becoming a regional power hub. Sudan is the first step towards fulfilling the Europe-Africa interconnector, a continental power grid with a 2,000 megawatt submarine cable that will go through Egypt, Cyprus, and then to Greece. And for that purpose, Egypt is currently finalizing plans to expand its Sudan's interconnector to become 3,000 megawatts. Adel El Marouki, CGTN, Cairo.
Still in North Africa, Egypt, like many other countries, has been hit pretty hard by COVID-19. In fact, this particular pandemic has wiped out its vital tourism industry and it's deflated the construction sector too. All of this has prompted authorities to close airports, restaurants, firms and shops and impose a nighttime curfew. CGTN's Beryl Oro reported this is hurting breadwinners across the country.
Day laborers who once had employment are now squatting in groups under a bridge in Egypt's capital, Cairo.
Our health depends on our source of income, and our health is our source of capital. If we work, we eat. If we don't work, we don't eat. This lockdown is correct, yes, but only if we were full-time laborers. We wouldn't have to leave our homes because we would get paid at the end of the month. But where is my salary? I have electricity, water bills and rent to pay.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has approved a $6 billion plan to stem the COVID-19 pandemic economic fallout. Measures include the payment of salaries for staff sent home by their employers, as well as a payment of £500 a month for 3 months for workers in the informal sector who are not registered on social insurance rolls. But access to the emergency fund is still a challenge to people who are not registered in the system.
I applied for government assistance and they told me to come in 2 days. I came after the 2 days, but they told me to come back in a week.
From around 30 million workers that make up Egypt's workforce, only 1.5 million have registered for the assistance. To help irregular workers, the government has launched an online system for them to apply for the monthly payment. Egypt's tourism sector typically accounts for an estimated 15% of the national GDP, but hotels and all tourist sites are shut, including for the first time in recent history, the pyramids of Giza.
I have 4 children. This whole coronavirus issue has completely destroyed the tourism sector. The tourism industry is the first thing that gets affected and the last thing that recovers. We've lived through the revolution phase and have gone through other periods of hardship, but we've never seen anything like the impact of the coronavirus.
No visitors could be seen in the normally bustling market that sells everything from chandeliers to souvenirs, and which normally also attracts Egyptians who come to drink tea at one of the many now closed cafes. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And 24 minutes into the hour, that's it for this highly truncated edition of Global Business Africa. As always, thank you for your company. We'll see you tomorrow.